Welcome to Inspiration and Transformation from the Banks of the Ganga with Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati, an American sannyasi living at the Parmarth Niketan Ashram in Rishikesh, India. Sadhvi is president of the Divine Shakti Foundation, a charitable organization bringing education, vocational training, upliftment, and empowerment programs to women and children. Sadhvi is also Secretary General of the Global Interfaith Wash Alliance and Director of the world-famous International Yoga Festival. Join the musings of an American sannyasi as Sadhvi shares the wisdom and teachings of her guru, His Holiness Pujya Swami Chidanand Saraswatiji.
Welcome everyone to Inspiration and Transformation from the holy banks of the sacred Ganga River in the land of Rishikesh, India. There's a lot of reasons that people don't actually listen to what we're saying. From the very deep to the more shallow. On a deep level, it's really kind of obvious. People don't want to hear what we are saying. It's very rare that people don't listen when we say, I love you. It's very rare that you have to say, listen to me for God's sakes, I love you. Listen to me for God's sakes, you're the best thing in the world. Why don't you listen to me? It's usually, why don't you listen to me tell you about either what I need from you, which presumably I'm not getting, which is why I need you to listen, or what you're doing that isn't what I want you to be doing. And if you just would listen, then you would change. And the truth is that it gets really tiring for people to constantly feel like they are not doing things right. It's one thing when it's every once in a while. But if you're in a situation where you feel like someone is not listening, and what they're not listening to is one of those two categories, then chances are you've been trying to say it a lot for a long time, which is why you're so frustrated that they don't listen, to the point where you'd send in a question about it, meaning, I've been trying to criticize this person and get them to change for so long, but they won't listen. Well, it's a rare person. They do exist. And ultimately, it's actually a space that we all should work to get to, in which when someone is criticizing us, we actually are able to really hear them. We may not always believe it. It doesn't mean that we're necessarily going to internalize everyone's projections on us, but at least we're able to hear it deeply and assess it without any sense of defense mechanism or any sense of denial or reaction, neither defensive nor offensive. But that's very rare, because for most of us, when someone's criticizing, it feels like they're on the offensive, and so we come on the defensive. And we don't listen, because we don't want to hear it. It's a lot easier to ignore it, push it away, roll your eyes, look at the clock, do all sorts of things that make the person know, I'm not listening. Because to really hear that, let's just assume for a minute that whatever you're telling them is correct, that it's not your projection. Just for a brief moment, Let's assume that you actually are saying something that is objectively true and that really is in their best interest to change, because they would be actually much better if they listened. Well, that's going to touch people in a very difficult space, because what it means is who you are right now, the way you are right now, is not right. Nobody wants to hear that. We're hard enough on ourselves. Most of us spend most of the time berating ourselves in our own mind, telling us that what we did was wrong or stupid or embarrassing. The last thing we need is to hear it from another person also. So we don't listen. Now there's another reason that people don't listen, which is just the superficial level of what's happening today with people just being distracted. I mean, even if it's not you telling them something that's wrong with them or something you need, but just trying to have a deep conversation about anything. In general, people have stopped listening. If you can't get it out in 30 seconds with captions, people can't hear you. They're scrolling their phones while you talk. I mean, how many times do you have a conversation with someone who's literally, it kind of blows my mind actually, because it wasn't very long ago. I mean, I'm 51, so to some people that's really old. To me, it doesn't feel very old at all. There was a time not that long ago in my life, before smartphones existed, but where if I had something in my hand that I was looking at and playing with, whatever it might have been, even if all I was doing was fidgeting with it while someone was talking to me, that some adult would say to me, "Put that down, young lady. That is rude. Look at someone when they talk to you." You would never have dreamed. I mean, could you imagine, for days prior to smartphones, could you imagine someone's talking to you and you pull out a book? I mean, literally, you just open up a book right in front of somebody's face, put on your glasses and start reading. Right? And could anybody imagine ever doing that? Somebody's talking, you open the newspaper, right? And yet somehow with the phone, we've got this collective agreement that that's okay to do. But it's the same thing. So one reason people don't listen may very simply be they're addicted to distraction. And the solution for that is not to get frustrated or angry, because they're not purposely doing it. They're as much a victim of it as you feel victimized by them not listening. And the way around that is simply to say to them, when would be a good time to have a conversation with you? Okay, clearly I see you're busy right now. No problem. It's not a rush. When would be the right time to come back and talk to you? Because what that does is it points out that you recognize that they're doing something else, that that's not conducive to a conversation, but that you're not going to be the one to say when is the right time to have it. Maybe they're doing something important. Maybe their stocks are all crashing right as you're trying to talk to them. Who knows? But get from them a time that's the right time to have a conversation. It'll make them understand that what you want is something different than what they're currently doing. And I can't imagine anyone saying there is no good time. Maybe they'll say in an hour, in half an hour. How about tonight? How about tomorrow morning? And then have your conversation. But I think that we all have to essentially come to terms with the fact that we now have these sources of distraction. And we can't wish them away, but we have to nonetheless not concede to live our lives in a way where we never have deep conversations, where we never look in each other's eyes. And depending on your relationship with that person, just navigate what's the right way. If it's someone you're in a family with, a spouse, a child, set some parameters. No phones at the table. No phones between this time and this time. It's family time. Whatever it may be. But just set some parameters to ensure that people actually can listen if they want to. But the last part, since as I said, for me, satsang is about us, not others. The last part to me that's the most important is when you feel like someone is not listening and you're so upset about it that it drives you to send in a question for online satsang about it, you're suffering. And that's not fun. And the question you need to ask yourself is, why have I put the end of my suffering in someone else's hands? I've determined in my mind that I am suffering and what I need in order to end suffering. But I've determined it in such a way that the end of my suffering lies in someone else's control. And that is about the most precarious thing you can do. Because no one is under our control. And if that which is most precious in my life, my joy, my peace, my freedom, my end of suffering is in the hands of someone else, or anything else that I have no control over, the weather, earthquakes, whatever you put your life, whatever hands you put that in, or whatever altar you offer that up to, it ideally should be something in your hands. Otherwise, we stay slaves. We stay prisoners to someone else's moods, to their actions. I mean, what if someone says, I can hear you and I don't want to listen? I mean, imagine they put down the phone, they're staring in your eyes, you say your piece, and they say, I hear you. I'm not listening. Well, there you are. Super stuck. Because you've got nowhere to go then. You've decided that what you want is them to listen. They have told you they have no interest in listening. Which is pretty much the exact same thing when someone ignores you for the 15th time when you're trying to tell them the same thing. They seriously are energetically holding up a sign that says, I'm not listening. It's like kids who go, right? They're there in front of you. If they just would take their fingers out of their ears and stop going, they could hear you. But kids do that when they don't want to listen. And when, as adults, someone rolls their eyes, looks at something else, looks away, interrupts, does all of the things that people do that make us feel not heard. It's essentially them going, I know you're talking. I'm not listening. And the question for us then becomes, okay, why am I now going to offer them my peace, my joy, my freedom. Why am I committed to suffering based on their inability or unwillingness to listen to how I think they could really improve their lives, or how they could do what I want them to do in a better way? Our goal is freedom. And these sorts of things just make us more and more stuck. Because then I need you to do something in a certain way for me to feel happy, for me to feel peaceful. Because the other way these things go is they say, I am listening. Right? We say, listen, I am listening. But we still don't feel heard because there's something energetic. But they insist they're listening. Again, you're stuck. You need something, you want something that you're not getting. And you've put your freedom to be free of suffering, in the hands of someone else's habits or ways. And spirituality is all about ending suffering and gaining freedom. Which means I have to unhook my peace and my joy from other people's actions, other people's words, other people's way of living, other people's way of treating me. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons people don't listen, but more important and more interesting than that is not why don't they listen, but why can't I be in peace even though I don't feel like they're listening? Why can't I be happy even though they're not listening the way I want them to? That's the interesting question. Because that's the question that actually takes us somewhere. And of course, that then becomes about each of our own psyches and what we think we need. But what spirituality gives us through our practices of insight, of introspection, of contemplation, of reading spiritual books and scriptures and works, listening to the words of saints and gurus and wise ones, and doing our own internal practices. Where we get is a place that says, I don't need to run my life based on these trigger points on my psyche. Right? And we've all got trigger points. Someone pushes this button, it triggers me in this way. And we have different trigger points. Put 10 people in a room, somebody says something. One or two of them may walk away feeling like that was the rudest thing in the world. The other 8 or 9 have no idea that anything even happened. It wasn't their trigger point. So spirituality is that which enables us to get free from our own trigger points simply by noticing them. Okay, so maybe I grew up feeling not listened to. Maybe I had really vibrant and kind of dominating older siblings or younger siblings who kind of took all of mom and dad's attention, and I never really felt listened to. And so that's a little trigger point in my psyche. Okay, beautiful. Welcome to the human race. We all have trigger points. But now I don't need to ruin my peace, my joy, my freedom, or my relationships because I've got this trigger point. And so through our practice of meditation, of yoga, introspection, we learn to see what they are and then to become free of them, just to notice them. Oh yeah, there's my trigger point. Okay. I don't have to get upset about it. I see it over there. I recognize it. But my heart is still open. I'm still in peace. And that's the way that we deal with this. Because that's the only path that matters, not why can't I get someone else to do what I want. That question will take your entire life. And you still won't solve it. At the end of your life, you'll realize, oh, I guess I've got to come back next life to really teach them. They still haven't learned. So don't get stuck on that particular treadmill.
You're listening to OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single
Circle of Hearts Radio is a sanctuary on the airwaves. Join me, Grandmother Alaya, in the circle on Sunday 2 p.m. Eastern as I share information to both enlighten and nourish your soul.
Hi, this is Christina Ricci with RAIN. Every 2 minutes, another American is sexually assaulted. If you or someone you know has been sexually assaulted, you are not alone. Help is just a call or click away through the National Sexual Assault Hotline. Please call 1-800-656-HOPE, that's HOPE, or visit rain.org, that's RAINN.org.
Brought to you by RAIN and this station.
Welcome back to Inspiration and Transformation. I'm so glad to have you all back here with me.
So meditation is a practice. What's important to realize is you're going back to your true self. A lot of people have this complex around meditation. I'm not doing it right. Nothing's happening. I think about it like, imagine that at the end of a stressful day, or any day rather, but let's call it a stressful day. You come home and you want to take a bath. You're tired, you're sore, you're stressed out. And you turn on a bath and you fill it with beautiful water and you put in some essential oils and some rose petals and you make this beautiful bath. But you get into that bath with all of your clothes on. How's it going to feel? Right, exactly. She scrunched up her nose like, ugh. Of course it's not going to feel good. Sopping wet, heavy clothes. Take that sense of away. In order to have that sense of you got to be naked. It's a prerequisite. In order to really, really enjoy that bath, you've got to leave all your clothes on the floor or in your room or hanging up, depending on how neat you happen to be, but they can no longer be on your body. In the same way in meditation, it's really about a removal of that which is on us. The clothes are on the body, but on our awareness, on our consciousness is usually ego stuff. My grudges, my pains, my fears, my worries, my competitions, my jealousies, my expectations. And so when I go to sit to meditate, you may have this beautiful environment, like your beautiful bathtub. But if I sit down and I'm full of stories, desires, expectations, fears, judgments. It's going to be like wearing high-heeled shoes and a suit and tie and a hat in a bathtub. You're not going to get anything that you're looking for. And so that's where, prior to going into meditation, a lot of us have practices that get us into a more meditative state. So if you look, for example, at the 8 limbs of yoga that the sage Patanjali gave. Now, of course, they can happen at the same time as well. They don't have to go sequentially, but they work really nicely sequentially because they begin with how you are in the world. If I'm lying and cheating and stealing and harming and committing all sorts of adultery and living this life that I feel ashamed of and is full of deceit, well, it's going to be very hard to embark on a yogic practice with that as my foundation. First, I've got to just at least have the bare minimum of what you would consider a dharmic life, a yogic life. I'm going to be honest. I'm not going to tell lies. I'm not going to steal. I'm not going to harm. I'm going to have integrity. Right? And then you move into asana, which is a use of the physical body, because of course our physical body is the medium through which we experience enlightenment, awakening. Our brains, which are part of our physical body, are the medium through which we experience consciousness and truth. If you're brain dead or brain damaged, you're not going to be able to have those experiences. So our physical body is the medium. We're not the body, but we need the body to experience that state. If the chemicals in my body are all haywire, my brain is not going to be able to calm down. If I've had 30 cups of coffee this morning, or I'm drunk, or I'm on drugs, or I'm all riled up because somebody posted something obnoxious about me on Twitter, I'm not going to be able to still my mind. I'm going to become a slave of the mind rather than the one in charge. So asana is a practice of using the physical body to find balance, to find stability, to find strength. Also on just a basic level, it's what enables us ultimately to sit for long enough to actually meditate. But then it gets interesting. Then we go into pranayama. And for me, on a personal level, that's where my meditative practice starts. I have an asana practice as well, I just don't do it at the same time. So my meditative practice begins with pranayama. It quiets the mind in a very, very, very powerful way. It fills you with an experience of not being separate from the world. I'm taking in breath from outside, I'm letting it go back, and suddenly, if you're really quiet, still you discover there's actually no inner and there's no outer. You begin doing pranayama and it's all about the inhalation and the exhalation. I'm inhaling in, I'm exhaling out, from inside to outside, from outside to inside. But if you allow yourself to get really meditative and really still, you discover there is no inner, there is no outer. There's just breathing. So I begin with pranayama. And then staying with the 8 limbs of yoga, we come to pratyahara, which is a withdrawal of the senses from the outer world to the inner world, which is just a very conscious redirection of my attention. I'm no longer going to be focused on the sounds outside, I'm now focused on the world inside. And of course the mind goes back out and you just bring it back in. And then dharan, which is a sense of single pointed focus. And you can use a mantra, you can use a candle flame, you can use a word, a name of God, you can use an image. But you see how we're going more and more inward, more and more still, more and more connected. And then once my senses are withdrawn, once I've got that single pointed focus, then you get into meditation. And then ultimately, eventually that meditation leads into samadhi, which is that ultimate oneness. So in terms of how to do it, I would recommend not just out of the blue sitting down, plopping yourself down and saying, all right, I've got 11 minutes, let's go. And sort of expecting that you're gonna get there before the alarm goes off and you've got to do the next item on your to-do list. But really give yourself a little bit of time to make the inner environment as conducive to meditation as possible. You know, it would be like jumping off the treadmill into bed. Okay, I got 8 hours starting now, let's go. Well, you wouldn't fall asleep for a long time. If you've been running on the treadmill and you're talking on the phone at the same time, no matter what time of day it is, it's going to take you a long time to fall asleep. That's why sleep specialists always say, you know, start to quiet down. Lower the lights. Put away your device. Like there's all this sleep health. Well, there's meditative health as well. Before you meditate, create a conducive environment. Do some pranayama. Consciously withdraw your senses. We're now going inward. Have something that you focus on. Chanting a mantra. Watching the breath. The breath is perfect. When I teach meditation, that's what we do. We follow the breath. We chant a mantra. And eventually, what happens is, the breath seems to sort of stop. It doesn't, but you're no longer watching the breath because it's not seeming to do anything anymore. The mantra seems to start chanting itself. And you find yourself in a very beautiful state of meditation, which for different people is a totally different experience. So again, there's no right, there's no wrong. There's deep spaciousness, expansive spaciousness, there's stillness, there's peace, there's joy, there's awareness, full consciousness of all. It's a lot of different experiences that come in that meditative time. But it helps if you prepare yourself for it. And then you go in. And you begin by watching the breath. But when you meditate on your own, just begin with your pranayama. Bring in the senses. Find something divine to focus on. And then go into your meditation. But remember, of course, that the way that you live your life has to be in alignment with that. That you're not going to be able to get to those stages if we're not living yam and niyam. You can't start building a house on the 4th floor, the 3rd floor if you start with asana. You got to start at the base. And then, of course, the mind wanders and you bring it back. And it wanders and you bring it back. And it wanders and you bring it back. And slowly, slowly it wanders a little bit less. But the key point is that it's about the self. It's about going in. And whatever technique you use, it's just a vehicle. It's just a vehicle to take you in. There's one of my favorite stories of the 3 guys who were stranded on an island, and they pray and pray that they should be rescued. And one day they wake up and there's a canoe on the edge of the island. And they're so excited. They jump in the canoe and they row it back to the mainland. And a couple of weeks later, somebody sees them walking through the marketplace and they've got the canoe on their heads. Walking in a single file line, carrying the canoe on their heads. And the person says, "Why are you carrying a canoe on your head through the marketplace?" And they say, "Oh, this canoe, it saved our lives. We were stranded on an island." And the person says, "Well, that's great, but why are you carrying it through the market?" And they say, "Oh, this canoe, it saved our lives. We were stranded." Well, the canoe was a vehicle. It was a life-saving vehicle. Glory to the canoe. But once they reach the mainland, the canoe actually becomes a hindrance rather than a help. Because now their arms are in a canoe, not able to do much. Now is the time to let go of the canoe, to just be where they have arrived. And the truth is, it didn't have to be a canoe. They would have been equally happy for a rowboat or jet skis or a raft. Doesn't matter. They just needed a vehicle to get across the water. And I love that story because our meditation techniques sometimes become like that. We become so attached to the technique that it actually ends up making us more stuck than free. So whatever technique works for you, use it. There's no wrong way to meditate, I always say, other than hitting the snooze button. That's the only wrong way to meditate, is your alarm goes off and you hit snooze. You go back to sleep. That's the wrong way to meditate. Other than that, whatever technique you use that works for you, use it. But then as you start to have those meditative experiences, you don't want to come back, oh, I forgot to be watching my breath. Like here I am in this beautiful expanded spaciousness, but suddenly I'm no longer watching my breath. Well, that's all right. That's all right. That was a technique. It got you here. So then you just allow yourself to be in that state of meditation. And of course, when you lose it, as inevitably you will, a thought will come, a sound will come. Then you begin again with watching the breath. And then again you reach that state. And then you're there. And then you lose it. And then again you're watching the breath. And it goes like that.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
OMTimes magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Do you have time to read that inspiring book or that blog post you've been meaning to get to? In your busy world, how do you improve yourself and keep your life going? I'm Lisa Kay, and my Between Heaven and Earth radio show can transform your life just by listening. Be uplifted with inspiring topics, positive stories, and ideas that really work. Between Heaven and Earth radio is conscious living for your soul, every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Baldwin with People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. I grew up loving circuses and other traveling animal shows, but it never occurred to me what life might be like for the animals. Training wild animals to do things they don't understand takes force. Routine discipline with a hook or whip with the heel of a boot shows the animal exactly who's the boss. Don't patronize animal acts. Please contact People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals.
757-622-PETA.
Welcome back. This is Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati with Inspiration and Transformation.
So the brain works almost all of the time, sadly, on what you could call autopilot. Okay. We've got two different types of brain, more than that, but for the sake of this discussion, we'll call it two. We'll call it conscious and unconscious. Okay, we'll lub subconscious in with unconscious. So we've got conscious mind and everything else. Most of us spend a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of our life in actually our conscious mind. Most of us are running on autopilot almost all the time. It's why we do things that later we're like, I cannot believe I did that. Who was that? We say things that later we think, who was that? Why did I say that? Because we weren't conscious. Because we're just operating habitually. Now, what that means is that in order to change it, I have to first become conscious. So being conscious is the absolute most powerful weapon you have against the autopilotness of your brain. Because if you are really conscious, let's say that I have a smoking addiction and I decide I'm going to quit smoking. But I don't even realize I'm smoking till I'm more than halfway through a cigarette. Because I've been addicted for so long that I literally just pull them out of the pack and light them up totally unconsciously. Well, even without anything else, if I simply became conscious, then I would know the moment my hand goes out to reach to grab a pack of cigarettes. Long before I found myself halfway through it, I would be present. Oh, there's my hand. Wait, I don't want to do that. I'm conscious, I'm aware. Because when you're conscious, you've got full control over your hands, your legs, your tongue, both what you eat and what you speak. We only do things with our arms and our legs and our tongues when we are not conscious, that we end up not wanting to do or regretting that we did, because they're habits. If we're conscious, we have full and complete control. There's nothing that you can't do. You may not be able to, do backflips on a balance beam, but within reason, there's nothing that you cannot do with these hands, these legs, this mouth. When you're conscious about it, you can say what you want, not say what you don't want. Eat what you want, not eat what you don't want. Do what you want with your hands, not do what you don't want. Go where you want, not go where you don't want with your legs. Because we're conscious. But most of us function on just such autopilot that we are slaves to the habits. My favorite story about this is the friend of a very beautiful, no longer in his body, but was a very, very beautiful spiritual teacher. And he would tell the story of his friend who every day when the friend went to work, he got off the bus to his work right in front of this pastry shop. And he would go into the pastry shop and buy pastries before he went to work. And then he decides he's going to stop eating sugar, so no more pastries. But every day, nonetheless, he still finds himself sitting down to his desk with a bag full of pastries. And he cannot figure out how this is happening. Every day he's going in and buying the pastries. So his friend, this beautiful spiritual teacher, says to him, well, why don't you leave your wallet at home? And the guy says to him, what, you mean I should steal them? And I love that story because the idea that the guy could actually not get the pastries was inconceivable. And so if he didn't have his wallet, the only other alternative must be he had to steal them. And this is how most of us operate. So it's a great question that you've asked. And really the answer is actually quite simple. Become conscious. Now, yes, so we're going to come there and then we're going to come into the actual habit. So how to become conscious. We learn being conscious in meditation. It's the easiest and best place to do it. So when I am meditating, lots of things happen. My knee itches, I want to scratch it. This ankle is hurting a little bit against the roughness of the mat. I want to move it. I'm thirsty, I want some water. My mind suddenly is thinking about this really difficult conversation at work I have to have later today. All of these things that are trying to pull my mind off of what I'm meditating on. But as I practice meditation, I simply notice them. I don't go with them. So before I develop this ability, it itches, I scratch it before I've even realized what I've done. It hurts, I move it before I realize what I've done. A thought comes, I go off on it. I have no idea where I started, where I end up. I mean, you're meditating and suddenly smell of coffee comes from your neighbors. And suddenly it's like, oh God, that coffee smells so good. I don't know why I gave up coffee to begin with. Anyway, the research now says it's a good thing to have. God, I remember those days I used to sit in Paris on the Champs-Élysées, drinking cappuccinos, watching people walk by. Those were such good days. Why did I give up that job offer? God, that would have been so good. I could be living in Paris now. Okay, right? A smell of coffee. And I'm now questioning the last 30 years of my life decisions. Like, how did I get there? But that's how the mind works. So the moment we're actually conscious, which is just a practice, but as I sit to meditate, I smell the coffee and I simply note smells, and I'm back to my breath. Later on, the more and more you meditate, you don't actually have to name it, you just simply draw the awareness back, but it helps in the beginning to note what you are noticing. Don't tell a story about it, don't judge it, don't analyze it, no adjectives, no adverbs, no stories, just smelling. That's it. That's all that's happened. Smelling. I'm back to my breath. I'm back to a mantra. Itching. Back to my breath. Back to my mantra. And slowly, slowly you develop a skill of being conscious, being present. Now in that moment, the consciousness is simply that I am smelling something, that I am itching, and now that I am aware of my breathing. But once you find relief from the distractions, which happens relatively quickly, just not immediately, then that consciousness starts to actually expand. And then you start being able to have a consciousness that is far beyond what the senses are experiencing or where the thought might be going. But it begins by simply being aware. You notice it. You realize that you are separate from it because you're the one who's watching. I'm the one who notices I'm itching, which means I'm not the itch. I don't have to scratch it. I've got a choice. I've just noticed it. And that technique and ability stays with you the rest of the day. So you find that you are, as I said, in control of the hands, the feet, the tongue, because you're aware, you're conscious of what you're reaching toward, what you're grabbing for, what you're pushing away. You start to notice it. Grabbing. Whether it's for a gulab jamun, whether it's for appreciation from the boss, whether it's for anything. What are you grabbing for? What are you longing for? What are you pushing away? That sense of aversion, we just become aware of it. We don't have to act on it. We just become aware. And so that's when you gain this conscious control over your life. But going back to your specific example about getting out of bed in the morning, any of these types of habits, they take a while. This is why I began by saying the brain functions on autopilot. It's just a habit. It's a groove, literally. Neurologically, we say a neural network. In India, we talk about sanskaras, grooves in our psyche. This is how we do things. This is how I react. And in order to change it, all you have to do is commit to changing it and then stick with it for a few weeks. And you'll lay brand new networks, brand new patterns, brand new grooves. But it takes usually at least a few weeks, in some cases a couple of months. But we're not talking decades. Short period of time, just commit. And if you find that you're hitting the snooze button, you can do what I used to do in college, which was put my alarm clock at the opposite end of the room so that you can't actually hit it from bed. You've got to get up. You've got to walk across the room in order to turn it off. Once you're up, you're up. Then you just need a little bit of willpower not to actually crawl back under the covers. But the snooze button happens kind of while we're still asleep. We're not even aware of it until we wake up hours later and realize, oh my God, I hit the snooze button. I never got up. So just stick your alarm on the other side of the room, as far away from your bed as possible, and make it as loud as you can so that you can't sleep through it. The other thing that you can do that works is start giving yourself sort of rewards and punishments. So you don't get breakfast until you meditate. Missed getting up early? Okay, well, whatever time you did get up, if you don't meditate, you're not getting breakfast. And then be strict with yourself. Set up some of these little techniques. They're just techniques to keep you going for enough days in a row that it becomes its own habit, and slowly, 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 that'll become your new habit. Last piece about this is, one of the things that keeps a lot of us from getting up in the morning is we don't get to sleep on time at night, and so we're really tired. And no matter how many times we say, I'm going to develop a pattern of getting up early, each night when we get to bed much later than we had hoped, we say, well, not tomorrow because I really need to sleep. So day after tomorrow, I'll start getting up early. Tomorrow for sure I'll go to sleep on time. Never happens. Instead, make yourself get up. Nobody ever died from lack of sleep for one night. Get up on time, no matter how many hours of sleep you've had. Because what that means is you're going to get to sleep early that night. If you actually got up on time, even though you went to sleep late, you're going to be so tired that now you will sleep on time. And thus you will get into a good pattern. So make yourself get up regardless of what time you go to sleep. And just be strict with yourself for a couple of weeks. First, it just takes willpower. And then it becomes its own habit. And it's how we change anything in our lives. But you can do it. And it's a beautiful question. And congratulations for having this vision and this goal at this young age. It's wonderful.
This brings to a close this hour of inspiration and transformation. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so glad to be together with you all each week. And I look forward to being together again next Thursday, same time, on OMTimes Radio.